Welcome back to my workshop. Now today I've got an absolute massive project. I've never done it this big before, but basically I've got to make a 3 meter long resin insert breakfast bar. Let's see what we got. Okay, so what we got is this, which is a 3 meter long worktop. Look, it's massive, still going all the way over here. Now this is the project, and what I've got to do is basically do a resin insert the whole length of that and also turn it into a breakfast bar. Don't know how I'm going to do that yet. I suppose I better draw something up. Okay, so the basic design is going to be, here's my worktop. What I'm going to do is take a slice off the top, and then that can be used as an upstand for the back of the I want to round off the corners, obviously because this is going into a workplace. I don't want any sharp corners. Also, this is going to have 3 legs, 1, 2, 3 at the front, which I have there, over there in a box. A routed out groove all the way around the outside of the table. Okay, this is going to be about 100mm wide. In the middle, I'm going to have it's a company logo. In here, what I'm going to have in the resin is this. All of that stuff. Okay, so I basically want to inlay all of this stuff, or some of this stuff, into the table. Now this is things like nuts and bolts, special tools, switches, knobs, connectors, fuses, drills. Now I want to try and get some of this into the table because the table's been made for an engineering firm. So this is basically going to represent what the firm's all about. Right, so as you can see, this is a 3 meter long oak worktop. It's obviously made of block oak, but that's what I've got to work with. Now, working in resin, I've only ever done small things, you know, this big before. So obviously doing something this big is now a bit of a challenge. Right, so I'm going to mark out how big I want this thing, or how wide I want it to be, and then start working out a design. Okay, so I'm ready to make the first cut. Now this is obviously going to be for the upstand at the back. What I'm going to do is cut a strip, a 40mm strip, the entire length of the worktop. For that I'm going to use my track saw, and I've got a combination of Titan rails and obviously a lovely Festool rail. But the problem is they're not quite long enough. So what I've done is I've clamped this end. I shall make most of my cut and then move my track. So this is the first cut. I'm a bit nervous, but let's see what happens. Okay, so I've managed to chop off a couple of lengths of this. One piece I'm using as the rear splashback. That will all be biscuit jointed. I've obviously cut another piece off the front. That's going to go underneath. You'll see that later. Now what I'm doing is I'm marking out where I want my channels to be for all the resin to go into, and also I've got the company logo which is going to go in the middle because obviously I want the corners to be rounded off. Markings going on here. I've got a rounded corner on the very corner, and then the channel, which is this bit here, this is also round to match the corner. It'll all make sense later. Right. Okay, so the logo is now going in the middle. I've roughly printed it onto a piece of paper, and what I'm going to use is some carbon paper to transfer the image onto the worktop. Right, so now I've got the logo marked out, I've got my channels all marked out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it overnight and then come and look at it in the morning and see if I still like it. If I do, I'll start routing out all of the shapes. If I don't, then I'll start again. But I think it looks okay. Let's see in the morning. Right, so I left this overnight. I'm quite happy with the design now. So I guess I've got to route it out. Now this is going to take hours. So I've got my mask, I've got my earphones. I suppose better start. Okay, so far this has taken me about 3 hours, and all I've got is some grooves all the way around here. I've been using my new router. This is harder than it looks. Right, let me carry on. This stuff's bloody hard. You could make battleships out of this. Right, so it's taken me days and days and days to actually route out all this design. What I've got to do now is the upstand, which is the bit at the back, and also the skirt. Problem is, where I've cut these off, my blade is not very good, and I've ended up with quite a few burn marks. So what I'm going to do is quickly run it through the planer thicknesser. But the issue I've got is the planer thicknesser, this thing over here, is behind all this rubbish. So I've got to get it out. I've got to get this place dust free. Look, sawdust everywhere. I've got to get it dust free before I do the resin. Right, let me dig that out and see if I can clean these up. Right, so I've now run these three through the planer thicknesser. The problem is they're 3 meters long, and obviously I need 3 meters before it goes into the planer and 3 meters when it comes out. My workshop ain't that big. My car's in the way. I just hit my bonnet. I scratched my bonnet. I need to do smaller stuff. Okay, so now we're looking at the back of the worktop here. I've got to join this upstand to the base, and I'm going to use a biscuit joiner. That's one of these. Okay, and all it does, it basically drills a big hole, and then you fit one of these. That's a biscuit. Okay, and that helps with alignment. So I've got to mark up this, plunge some holes, stick in some biscuits and stick on some glue. And that should help with alignment and make it all nice. Right, let's get on with that. Right, so that's now gluing up. I shall leave that overnight to make sure it's set properly. I've now got my front skirt on the front and the sides, and I've got my upstand on the back. It's all being glued, it's all biscuit jointed. So tomorrow I've got to round off some corners and do some sanding. Right, so now most of the woodworky stuff's done, and the bench, it's gone. Where's it gone? Let me show you. Right, into the house. Yep, it's in the house. It's in the dining room. Right, well, I've got permission to do this in the dining room because I need to do it where it's warmer, a little bit less dusty. So I'm going to go out in the garage, tidy up all that stuff and mix the resin up outside, and then come in here to do the pour. Right. Don't make a mess. Right, so this is the nerve-wracking bit. I've got to do my first bit of resin. Now what I'm going to do is a very thin layer of coloured resin first to fill the channel, and then I'm going to do a clear on top of that. Now the resin I'm using is this stuff, which is Resin Pro. Okay, and you use, it's a two-part resin, so you've got part A and part B. You use 100 of that to 67 of that. So I've got my scales, I've got a jug, I've got a stirry stick. So let's mix up some resin and pour that in and hope it doesn't go wrong, because that'll be really bad. Right, so that's it for tonight. This has now got the logo done, and it's supposed to be yellow, but it's not very yellow. That's all setting in there now. I've got my boxes full of nuts and bolts that I've got to put in there. I'm going to leave that overnight now, and then tomorrow we'll do some more. Right, so it's the next day now. This has not been drying for 24 hours yet. It's only been drying for about 17 hours. So it's a little bit soft. But what I want to do is now put all of my nuts and bolts and washers and connectors and things into the channels. Now I want to do it so it doesn't look like it's just dumped in there. So I've got to place them in. The problem is, because it's still soft, once I put it in, that's it. I can't move it. So I've got to be very careful where I put them. I can't just dump it in. I'm going to start laying them out, and then I can put another coat of resin over the top. Okay, so I poured that lot in. That was another 3 litres. I'm going to leave this for a couple of minutes and then hit it with the air gun, this thing. Okay, just to get some of the bubbles out. But in the meantime, I'm going to mix up another 3 litres. God, this takes so much. Right, so that's another 3 litres put in there. I'm probably going to have to do another layer, but I've got to wait for this to dry now, so I'll leave that for another day. So that's me done for today. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Right, this might be a bit difficult to see, but on this corner here, the resin is very close to the corner. So what's happening, even though the table's level, it's flexing, and this corner is lower than the rest. So when I get to the last millimetre, it's going to end up spilling out this side, but it's still going to be a gap the other side. So what I've done is I've got a stool here underneath, and I've got one of my clamps on extend, and I'm basically going to try and lift this corner up very gently. Okay, I'll now wait for that to settle, make sure it's level, and then I can do my final little bit of filling. But I think I've got just about the right amount in there now. It's looking okay. Right, let's leave it this time. I'm going to tidy up everything. Right, so it's been almost a week since I did the pour now. I've moved it back from the dining room back into the workshop. I had to get Mrs. Little Workshop to help me because it's so heavy now. Right, the outer edge of resin has sunk a little bit. It's probably only about 1 millimetre at most. Let me show you. Okay, so here it's sunk just a little tiny bit. See if I can give you an idea of how much it's sunk. You can just about get a piece of tissue paper through. But when the light catches it, it notices. Okay, so what I've got to do now, the reason it's back in the workshop, is to give it a quick sand, mainly for around this area here, because the resin I put in was blue, and the blue has soaked into the top where I spilled it because I was a bit clumsy. Then basically sand the rest of it down, and then pour resin over it. Right, I'm going to start sanding, and then once that's done, I've got to get it back in the dining room. Right, I've got it turned over on its side at the moment, just so I can get a covering on the bottom, because I don't want the bottom uncovered and the top covered, because it might twist. But yeah, look, I was lucky here, a couple of little spaces where the resin has found little holes. It could have all emptied out. Right, I'm going to sand these off and then give the bottom a coat of varnish. Right, so while I'm waiting for the varnish to thaw out a little bit, because it's frozen, I'm going to quickly put my mark on the bottom. I'm going to do that by using some carbon paper, transfer it on, and then use my pyrography pen to burn it. Let's do some burning. Right, so the bottom has now had a coat of this, which went on really well. So this is polyurethane satin. I'll leave that overnight and then I'll get back to this at some point tomorrow. Okay, so now we're back in the dining room where it's a little bit warmer than it is in the workshop. What I've got to do now is the bit I've been putting off is floating resin across the whole thing. Now, the first thing to do is to make sure it's dead level. Now, I've been using, obviously, my longest one, spirit level that is, to make sure it's flat this way. Slightly shorter one to make sure it's flat this way. And using another little one just to make sure. Now, obviously, don't rely on one single spirit level, just in case it's not quite level. So I've used 2 or 3. Alternatively, another way you could do it to make sure it's level, just get yourself a handful of ball bearings, drop them on the worktop. If they all roll to one end, you know it's not level. Okay, these have stopped. Try it again. Okay, so I can now assume that that is level. Right, next, what we got to do is figure out how much resin I'm going to use. Now it's got to be at least 1.5 mil deep to self-level. Okay, so what I do is I measure the length, which we know is 3 meters long. Then the width, and the bit we're going to cover is 48 centimeters wide. And we want it about 1.5 mil deep. So let's go and calculate how much we need. Okay, so we're back in the workshop now. Now our measurements, 300 centimeters by 47 centimeters by, now I want about 1.5 mil, so we'll say 0.15 centimeters. Okay, so that basically gives us 300 times 47 is 14,100 times the 0.15 gives us 2,105. So that's, because we know 1,000 cc is 1 litre, so that's 2,000, so we need just over 2 litres, which seems like a lot of resin. So if I make up about 2.5 litres of resin, it's better to make up too much than not enough. So I shall make up 2.5 litres of resin, and then we're going to pour it on the table. Right, just got brave enough to start mixing up the resin, and my bloody scales went flat, my battery went flat. Right, let's mix up some resin. So at this point there should be a strangely pleasing video clip of me pouring resin over the table. But my SD card on my phone filled up and I lost that bit. So here is a little clip of Ginger the cat being very festive. Right, so that's all poured now. I've got to leave that for a little while and then come back to it, or keep coming back to it with the hot air gun to make sure there's no bubbles. I think I've got as many bubbles out as I can at the moment. All this, some more coming back. Right, so I'm going to hit that again with the hot air gun and then leave it and make sure I don't get any bubbles in it or any dust in it. Right, so let's leave that to dry for a while. I'll go back to it every 10 minutes or so and quickly hit it with the air gun to get rid of any bubbles, because you can actually see the bubbles coming up through the wood. It's obviously the air trapped in the wood is coming up into the resin. Right, so hopefully that's going to set. Right, so this has been drying now for a couple of days. Seems to have set okay. There's a few drips underneath which I'm going to have to clean off, and also at the ends, on the end grain, it seems to have been a bit more absorbent and it seems to have soaked the resin in. So I'm going to have to try and do some touching up with the resin. But the first thing to do is for me to turn it on its side and start getting some of these drips off. It's really heavy. I'm going to give it another coat of resin over the bottom. There's no point watching that. I'm just going to give it another roller, the same as I did before. Right, so that's it. That's all the resin done. This stuff is brilliant. Yeah, I will use this again. Before I used glass cast, but this stuff seems really good. Very few bubbles. Very impressed. Right, I'm going to leave that to dry now. And then tomorrow I've got to put these on, which is for the legs. Okay, so these got a screw underneath the worktop, and then the legs screw into that. Right, that's tomorrow. Right, so I think that's the top of the table done now. What I've got to do now is put on the legs, and these are just these brackets that screw into the bottom of the table, and then the legs screw into those. So I've got to drill 6 holes and then stick 6 screws in. Right, so now I've got the 3 legs on. They're quite long legs and very small screws. There's a lot of screws, but the legs are very long. Don't know how good they're going to be. Okay, so this is all done now. What I'm going to do is wrap it up, get it out of the dining room, because for some reason this little workshop just wants a dining room back for Christmas. Let's wrap this up and get it to site. Right, so this is all wrapped up now, ready to go to site. I don't want to get it scratched before it gets there. Okay. Get it on the truck. Right, so let's have a closer look at the final product. Right, so that's it for this project. It's been quite a long one. Very impressed with the resin, so I will use that again. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you get some tips and things from this. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you can, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Right, so it's been almost... Right, so this has been drying now for a couple of days. Let's try that again. Hello. So that will be thrown away once it's dried. Let's try that again. I'm going to cut the back. I'm going into.